despite the fact that Bella Swan has flaws as a character, it doesn't disqualify her from being a being Mary Sue for a lot of reasons. So let's get into this. The funny thing about the series is even after 10 years, people love to watch hate for it. I suppose it doesn't help that Maya herself keeps dishing out LOLs. So now I've briefly touched on the problem with this behemoth's very conception. It's time to move on to bigger fish. This will be the first of a good number of character-centered rants. Isabella Mary Swan, the very name is enough to give me shivers of horror. The character launched a character type and mindset, and the idea of raging Mary Sue's being acceptable to this day that still impacts by young adult fiction. While Bella Swan may not be the worst Sue I've ever encountered, she's certainly one of the most influential. We're talking about things that are wrong with this series. There's nothing more wrong than this particular character, the ideal. Bella is an every girl. She's not a hero, and she doesn't know the difference between Prada and whatever else is out there. She doesn't always have to be cool or the coolest clothes ever. She's normal, and there aren't a lot of girls in literature that are normal. Another thing is that Bella is a good girl, which is just sort of how I imagine teenagers, because that's how my teenagers were. Stephanie Meyer, EW interview. Bella Swan was meant to be a girl that, I'll be honest, doesn't appear too much in literature. She was supposed to be a character that wasn't particularly pretty or nor talented. She was supposed to have issues with her own self-esteem, which hid herself in the guise of cynicism and sarcasm. She was supposed to love books because at heart she was a bit of a hopeless romantic, but wouldn't dare admit it because it was stupid. She was supposed to be kind of tame, a little bit on the sidelines of life even. While other people had parties and friends, Bella read. She was supposed to love her mother, yet the stress of dealing with the woman had affected her, making it difficult to reach out to people, possibly even due to fear of being just like her. Yet at the same time, she was affected by her mother's prejudice against her father and the town she'd been born in. Suddenly, because she felt somewhat threatened by her mother's new husband, she decided to live with her father, and in that new world, she was supposed to be placed in a situation where she had to use her intelligence to navigate a world of creatures that were much more difficult than her, while at the same time slowly repairing the relationship with her father and learning to love the strange, rainy town of Forks. In reality, Bella Swan had potential. She could have been an interesting character. She could have been likable. What went wrong? Bella has what I consider two things wrong with her. She's passive and she's unlikable. Bella doesn't actually do anything during the entire series. Meyer might claim that Bella, quote, worked hard, unquote, but in reality there wasn't anything that wasn't said right in front of her on a silver platter. For instance, even in the first book, Edward loves Bella without her so much as having to attempt to be attractive. The other vampires are interested in her, and the only actual thing that she does for herself is run away. And even after that, after being lugged around by the other vampires. So, I mean, all this screams flaw, but, there's a reason why this is still an obvious Mary Sue. The same happens in New Moon. Bella is hurt due to an accident. Edward decides to leave her. Nothing is Bella's fault, and so while Bella can sit and stew in her depression, she doesn't have to think that maybe she was wrong. Again, Jacob automatically falls for her, while Bella doesn't have to fall for anyone at all. She makes no move without someone right next to her helping her out. In the clip, she's again both beyond responsibility and also not involved in the danger. Breaking Dawn, as terrible as it was, shows this in all its glory. Bella not only doesn't have to work for her happy ending, she doesn't have to work to control bloodlust, and it's just naturally the most powerful vampire ever. Her shield takes very little time to control and allows her, rather than to stand on Jesus, this man, whoever wrote this, made a little spelling mistake. Boo boo. It's 2TWO, but 2 feet. But to avoid having to stand on her own 2 feet, on her own 2 feet, yeah, but to avoid having to stand on her own 2 feet, well, he spells it right then, later, Well, in the end, she is definitely more powerful than her husband. She doesn't make a choice, done something, or really even have so much to lift a finger for her perfect life that's set in front of her. It's like a Cinderella story. Only Cinderella was sitting around while the stepsisters did all the work, got changed by the godmother, was carried off to the palace, and never even had to flee because she was so fucking perfect. If this wasn't bad enough, Bella's a character. He is not a character you'd ever want to succeed. Not now. I'm personally now the person who wrote this. I'm personally a fan of suffering. As far as I'm concerned, a character must suffer for them to be interesting. A character who's never had anything bad happen to them is boring. Not only that, but they are often actually kind of mean, as they lack any reason to sympathize with others. And Bella is like that to me. She hates absolutely everyone in the book who isn't Edward. She hates her classmates for being boring and shallow and not like her. She hates werewolves for not being cool as vampires and having the gall to think that they can take one out. She hates other vampires for being pretty and immortal and when she's mortal and dying. She hates her mother for being flighty and imperfect. She hates her father for telling her no. And she hates Leah for calling her out. But most of all, Bella Swan hates humanity for being flawed. Oh, she'll give people lip service, but she doesn't seem to like anyone. When she goes with friends, it's because they, quote, made her, not because she likes them. If she ever says anything nice about someone, it's because they're leaving her alone. She doesn't even like things. We're told that she likes to read, but we never see it, and her half-baked attempts at literary analysis are hardly signs of her being a bookworm. And note, the books that Bella likes, Wuthering Heights, Romeo and Juliet, Pride and Prejudice, these books actually give no indication of Bella's personality other that she reads, quote, good literature. She doesn't like just books. She doesn't like mysteries. She doesn't like fantasy. She doesn't even like stupid romance novels. All we know is that she's read the school's reading list, nothing more. Bella Swan as a character is flat and bland as the plains of Nevada during the winter. She's a solely sociopathic young woman who is in reality just as abusive as Edward, just in a more quiet way. And the only reason we don't see it is because Edward doesn't have the same subtlety about things as she does. She usually does it. And it's usually done in ways that we're usually not even thinking about. The fact that everything always goes her way, and the fact that she seems to think that she deserves all of it, but does nothing make her all the more hateful. And yes, I do deem her abusive, and let's look at how she treats all the people around her, shall we? First of all, we have her father, Charlie Swan. Poor Charlie's going to get his own chapter. Bella treats this man from the first like he's total dirt. First of all, despite the fact that he's clearly desperate to connect with her, she refuses to so much as acknowledge that her blood ties to him. She treats him like he can't feed himself, and then uses the final words of his ex-wife, who, judging by the fact that she still has pictures of her, he still loves her, as a way to hurt him so much. He'll let her go do what she wants. That's the first book. That's the first book. And Moon, she runs off to Italy while he's at the funeral of his friend who died brutally. And then she acts miffed when he is rather understandably upset. In Breaking Dawn, though, Bella goes to new extremes. She flat out pretends to die. She refuses to let Charlie see her and forces him to suffer because she doesn't want to admit that she's preggers with Edward's demon spawn of a child. Oh, and she wants to be a vampire. She really likes to frame it as selflessness, but in reality, it was because it was in her way. Now let's talk about her behavior in regards to her human friends. She thought that puts Jessica in danger in the second book, finds their ideas and opinions utterly dull, sneers at them behind their backs. Yet they're supposed to love her. When one of them snarks at her for her behavior, she's the bad guy. This is the person that person who ends up sitting with you at lunch, who nobody likes, but acts like she's doing you a favor by being seen with you. Finally, I'm going to bring up Edward. Edward is abusive. He's incredibly abusive. I'm not saying that he's not. A lot of my rant on him is going to be centered on just how terrible he is in a relationship. But Bella is not an innocent flower, and I think that sometimes that can be forgotten when we look at the horror that is Edward Cullen. Edward is using Bella flat out. She doesn't love him. Bella is using Edward flat out. She doesn't love him. She doesn't know the first thing about him. She doesn't even have a flimsy excuse of a fascination that Edward does. She loves the fact that he is rich, immortal, pretty, and powerful. She couldn't care less about Edward's supposed moral struggle to retain his humanity, mortal struggle to retain his humanity. As a matter of fact, she's always trying to tempt him to turn her into a vampire, despite the fact that it's clear he doesn't want to, and he thinks he think again, another spelling mistake. He thinks that he'll be, things. It's things like, sorry, I noticed these things. I don't really care about them that much. I just see them. So, I hope this person sees this so they can fix that. That'll be making her suffer. If he does. Bella doesn't care about talking with it out with him. She doesn't care about thinking about the reasons that why he doesn't want to. As a matter of fact, she doesn't care about him at all. It's about what he can give her. She said it herself. She wants to be Superman. Bella is an emotionally manipulative, joyless, boring young woman who doesn't care who she hurts so long as she gets what she wants. The funny thing is that if you read a fanfic at a series, you'll often find better Bellas. They'll be genuinely interested in other people, snarky, sweet, innocent, all the things they want to see Bella as, but she's really not. Bella is a character that fans project themselves into, and that's where the real clincher lies, the fantasy. The problem is that Bella was never a character in her own right. She was Meyer's ideal of herself in high school. Even the experience of her moving to a new school and having everyone like her was based off of Meyer's own experience of going from high school to college. Bella Swan was and still the avatar of Meyer's lived her perfect life, though. When it was published, the same held true for her fans. You can see it in reviews and comments. They are Bella. Bella is not a person in of herself. Bella became the way that Meyer and the reader got revenge on people. A common problem with Mary Sue is that morality is deemed by how much a character likes Bella. As such, Lauren and Leah in particular, despite not doing anything wrong, suffer. Laura is the blonde cheerleader that Meyer hated so much in high school and she wanted to badly outdo. Leah is the harsh critic that can't see how hard Meyer is working. Bella is such a sociopathic monster because Meyer and her readers are projecting both their revenge fantasies and their romantic fantasies onto her. They read that what they want her to want to read about her, nothing more, nothing less. As such, Bella is a blank slate with no interest, no feelings, and no life of her own. The reader is the one that projects these things onto her. The boys all love Bella, including one teacher, because Meyer wants people to love her, and in fantasy they do. In her fantasy they do. Bella has only the clumsiness as a flaw because Meyer honestly doesn't want to look at her problems and her own flaws. This was an escapist fantasy, and as such, everything was fine and everyone loved her. There was nothing bad, nothing wrong. The reason that Bella could not develop remained the same whining, unmotivated brat for the entirety of the series is that she was based off of how Meyer wished that she could behave in the series. She wanted to be able to act this way, to be able to be the one in control, to always be a step ahead, to always be right. In the end, to be a near savior figure that both redeems her lover from his sins and saves him physically, all while transcending her human weaknesses and remaining a young and beautiful innocent looking forever. This is why the fans love her, not because of any particularly interesting character on Bella's part, but because in their minds they're allowed to become her, and through becoming her, achieve this through her. What's more is this is the reason why even now Meyer and the fans of the series take the thing so damn personally when someone criticizes it. It's like someone coming into your fantasy world and telling you everything wrong with it. This is particularly true with Bella's ending. This was the perfect end as far as Myers was concerned. Of course, Bella didn't have to suffer. Why would she? She deserved it, just like Meyer and all of her readers deserved it, fixing it. So I'm going to do something that I haven't seen other people do for these kinds of rants, because I firmly believe that you can learn from the mistakes of others. And honestly, I think that Bella could have been redeemed. I'm going to give something constructive. The initial concept of Bella's character wasn't a bad idea. It was fairly new for YA and could have been interesting. A normal girl with no great talent being forced to outsmart, deal with, and even fight against supernatural creatures who did have a lot of advantage over her is really interesting. It's no wonder people paid attention. First of all, it would have been to acknowledge Bella's fault and give her a reason for them. Let's say that the difficulty of essentially taking care of her own parent had taken its toll on Bella. Say that Renee, while not abusive, was not a good parent. Bella, since she was a little girl, always had to be the responsible one, the careful one. She had to learn to feed herself because her mother would forget. She had to learn to deal with issues alone because her mother, while sympathetic, didn't want to act like a mom. She wanted to act like a gal pal, and Bella always wondered if at some level her mother regretted having her. Say that she liked to read, but her mother didn't want a bookworm, so she only got to read what was assigned reading because reading was discouraged. This has Bella left with no friends, no social life to speak of, no hobbies, and only the school reading list for entertainment. The struggle between what her mother wants and what she has in her is a state being in a state of being kind of a jerk, but also unhappy about it since she knows that she is one. Then, perhaps due to a fight, she agrees to live with her father. Charlie is completely different, steady, responsible for the first time. She's with someone who honestly wants her there, but the same problems are still ingrained in Bella. Thus, her subplot would be not opening up to people, but also starting to think that people, her father, and even Bedward could like the girl that sometimes shows her face behind her snark and stubbornness. Yet these qualities also prove useful as perhaps as a way to get closer to her father. She starts snooping around a series of bizarre murders that started around Forks. You might disagree with the idea, but for Bella to have ever stood as a good or even interesting character, she needed to have a character or personality and issues of her own, rather than for her to just be centering on the romance vampires and the hope of immortality, and for her to make some move on her own to contribute to the plot. Next up, the man who fluxes between being annoying and downright terrifying, Edward Cullen. So this is all about. So how does Bella, despite being such a arrogant, conceited, person that really has nothing exceptional about her, except for the fact that Edward picked her, still qualify as a Mary Sue? It's because of the way that the fucking story functions and works. The fact is that despite the fact that she is so intensely unlikable as a character, as the reader, you fucking hate her as you're going through it. She's awful, and yet everybody still kisses her ass. She gets away with fucking metaphorical murder, and everybody still treats her like she's done nothing wrong and that she's perfect. The whole fucking city of Forks seems to revolve around her. The fact is that Edward falls in love with her without her having to do a damn thing to earn his affection, to work for it, or anything. Everybody is tripping all over themselves and tripping balls about her, and nobody ever hates her. Nobody ever has a problem with her and her behavior. She acts like a total bitch and steps all over everybody, and they still kiss her ass. And that's why Bella Swan is a fucking Mary Sue. It's the way the story is written. She's written as a fucking fantasy of Stephanie Meyer. I can be all arrogant, conceited, and haughty and act like I'm so superior, smug and superior to everybody else, and I can step all over them and think that I'm better than them, and yet they'll still kiss my ass. Stephanie Meyer wanted to get away with murder, and that's why she wrote them this way. She wanted to be able to do whatever the fuck she wanted and sneer at people and be all haughty and high above them and have them still kiss her ass. And you know what? As far as as I'm concerned, as somebody that reads this, I don't think she's a nice person because she wrote this. There's too much of her in this book and everything, and if she has this fantasy, she's probably a mean girl, and I don't like her. I don't like mean women. Boorish, rude, arrogant, and conceited. I can't think of a less flattering set of qualities. So, yes, Bella Swan has flaws, but the fact is the book is written in such a way where she gets to be a deeply flawed character, and yet everybody still trips all over themselves to be with her.